would you believe that the great Hikaru Nakamura, yeah, the 5-time US champion, that guy, the guy with like a million bazillion followers, he went down to Tani not once, but twice. He probably had about 30 wins in there too, but let's celebrate the young wonderkin, FIDE Master Tani Adewumi, who sometimes jumps from ChessKid to chess.com so he can get all the glory of playing against Hikaru. Let's celebrate the first time that Tani beat Hikaru. We had this crazy position, and Tani was white, and Hikaru decided to play the move bishop to d5. Okay, big decision for Tani. Do we trade queens, or do we go? Do we stay, or do we go? Tani doesn't trade queens. Are you kidding me? Now, there's a little bit of pressure against his king. Actually, there's a lot of pressure against the white king, but he did not trade queens. Oh no. Tani decided to play queen takes f7. It must be nice to not yet be a teenager and have absolutely no fear at all. Okay. Now, Hikaru played a very interesting idea that we're going to come back to in just a minute. He played bishop to d4 with the idea that, of course, if the rook takes that bishop, then the back rank is incredibly weak. So after bishop to d4, the idea is if you take this, well, I think you see what's coming. Queen takes, back rank, regular checkmate, too many problems for white to solve. Very, very creative idea. And again, we're going to come back to that one. However, what Hikaru could have done to at least achieve equality, and honestly in a blitz game, it probably would have resulted in a win. Sorry, Tani. Sorry. Maybe not for you, but against me, it would have resulted in a win, was the move queen to a4, threatening mate on a2. Now, Tani already has to play just about perfectly to survive because, for example, if he pushes the a3 pawn, well, the queen just takes the rook, right? There was a secondary threat, mate and rook, okay? Now, if you push the b3 pawn to b3, then the queen can just take the bishop. Okay, that's actually better than taking this because then Tani would actually mate on b7, okay? But queen will just take bishop. So in this position, I mean, it looks lost for white, right? There's a mate threat. We already said the rook is hanging. We already said the bishop is hanging. How could you possibly stop all three? I mean, I would be shaking in my boots against anybody. Against Hikaru, probably just resign. However, there's a brilliant move by Tani, and only the brilliant move is even able to hold the draw. Rook takes bishop. Actually, you might find this move by accident out of desperation because you really have basically no other move. Okay, now we're going to turn the tables back on Hikaru. Interestingly, in this position, he should not take the rook. We already mentioned there is a mate on b7. In fact, if you want to be fancy, and I think Tani would be fancy, he would probably mate with his bishop. Okay, so Hikaru would play queen takes. And now we have revived the mate threat on f1. Only move for Tani. He's got to start playing perfect chess. Rook takes bishop was an only move. Now he has to play rook to d1. That is also an only move. And here, feel pretty confident, Hikaru would have played b3 to keep the attack going. After pawn to b3, there's obviously a mate threat coming up. Not a lot of options here. Tani would have had to have played the move pawn to a3. Now remember this bishop d4 idea I talked about a minute ago? Yeah, Hikaru could have hit Tani with bishop to d4. Not literally hit, okay? He's too nice of a guy for that. But bishop to d4, and now white is back with a world of problems because with the pawn pin, queen takes a3 is the big threat, which would lead to mate. And if the rook takes the bishop, well, then Mr. Back rank happens again, right? It's mate after white puts a couple of pieces in the way. Bishop d4 actually looks like just about a winning chess move. There's only one move for Tani in this position to survive. He would have to play the move queen to e7. If he plays a move like, let's say, king to b1 to get out of the diagonal, then a simple move queen to e2, and there's too many threats. There's a threat on the rook, a threat on the mate, and again, you still can't take because amazingly, the back rank is incredibly weak. I'm going to play queen f1 check, and even though you can block with your bishop, my rook just comes on over to c8, and yeah, you can sack your queen and rook and give a couple of meaningless checks, but ultimately, black would win this position. However, again, going back, if Tani played absolutely perfect defense and found the move queen to e7, well, now the game, if played perfectly, would end in a draw. If Hikaru played queen e2, rook b1, and Hikaru could bail out for a draw here, even though he's down a couple of pawns, by taking and playing queen check, and then playing queen check and taking the perpetual. I mean, that in itself would be worthy of a YouTube video if the game ended in this manner. Let's go back and see how Tani actually won. So After queen takes f7, Hikaru tried bishop to d4. And now Tani did not take. Again, we already said queen takes bishop leads to a mate threat on f1, a mate threat on a2. Tani played an incredible move here, one that the old chess.com analysis engine gave a double banger, 2 exclamation marks, bishop to b7, sacrificing his own bishop because he's going to win it back later. Now Tani does realize going into the endgame with the queens off the board is the way to go. And after takes, well, it turns out white is actually up some pawns here and doing really well. The rest of the game was not played perfectly, but I do want to show you how it finished. So I'm going to play a couple of moves here. Tani probably should have just brought this bishop back to g3, but instead the black rook gets some activity. Tani defends against back rank mate. He puts his rook behind the pass pawn. And now here was the last chance perhaps for Hikaru to survive. The rook should run all the way back to h8, because if it does, then that stops the move f7 because king takes and the king and the rook successfully stop the promotion. So time to play a little bit of defense here. Instead, we had the move e5, and Hikaru probably analyzed that after push, he could sacrifice and maybe get that piece back. But after the move rook to g7, Tani actually managed to hold on to his bishop and go on to win the game in a few more moves. Very exciting stuff with both sides going for checkmate at the same time. Tani successfully transitioned to a winning endgame, one of the hallmarks of a strong player. Now, have I ever scored a single victory against Hikaru? Are we counting tennis? We're not? Okay, no, I've never done that. So Tani, you've done what very few people have done before, and who knows, maybe you'll play a one-on-one match with Hikaru one day, and we'll see how you do over the course of 3 hours.
Welcome to my world. Time to attack!
A knight on the rim is grim. Are you sure you know what you're doing?